in court with their attorneys. People are represented. We had a delay today due to transportation problem in the sheriff's department, and now we're ready to proceed. Last night at recess, counsel had submitted their arguments to the court in regards to the statements sought to be elicited from Mrs. Cano in regards to conversation that occurred on Thursday evening, August the 24th, between Mrs. Cano and the defendants. Since that time, the prosecution submitted to the court an additional case to review, People versus Cruz, CRUZ at 264 Calap 2nd, 350. I assume the defense has had access to that as well.
Yes.
All right. Without repetition of any arguments that have already been made, does either side have anything additionally that you want to add?
Just a comment on the case that the people cited to the court. It's very similar to Edwards, which is also cited, in that they both deal with post-arrest statements in which the defendant goes into a long narrative after he's been accused and after he's in police custody. And in both situations, the defendant appears to be attempting to use the hearsay statements as substitution for being cross-examined. And he's putting on his entire defense through the vehicle of an out-of-court statement. And in this case, the statements are not lengthy post-arrest narratives. They're not made at a time when the Menendez brothers are even under suspicion. And in fact, in terms of the 1252 analysis of whether the statements are made at a time when the circumstances indicate untrustworthiness, I think it's significant to point out to the court that at the same time, or right around the same time these statements are being made, the people's own evidence points to the fact that the defendants are engaged in this, what they have characterized as a wild spending spree. And then as late as October, according to the people's own evidence, they are making highly incriminating statements to Dr. Oziel. So the overall circumstances don't suggest an intent to manufacture evidence in the way that the cases cited by the people would seem to indicate the limitation under 1252 applies. And the case that we cited to the court, People versus Harris, the court, they're holding that it was error to refuse admission of a it wasn't post-arrest, but it was after the defendant was in custody, and he is writing poetry and expressing ideas in that poetry, and it's offered in that case in the penalty phase for the purpose of showing his state of mind. It seems like the circumstances in that case present a far stronger case for unreliability than the circumstances of the statements made here. And then lastly, Your Honor, it appears from Ms. Cano's testimony yesterday that many of the statements that she heard made by one or the other of the Menendez brothers can be classified as non-hearsay. And it would be offered for the non-hearsay purpose of showing circumstantially their state of mind. I think the statements that are directly statements of their then existing state of mind are admissible under the hearsay exceptions which we cited to the court. But many of the statements that they made are not being offered for their truth.
And specifically, which statements are they?
The statement, "I can't believe my father has so much money," is not being offered to show that the father, in fact, did not have so much money, but to show circumstantially their belief that they didn't know of the extent of his wealth. The statement, the questions, at one point either Eric or Lyle asked Mrs. Cano, "Are you sure my father didn't disinherit it?" or words to that effect. The question, "Are you sure that policy is not canceled?" The statement by Eric in asking or stating that his father had not taken the physical, that's not being offered to show that he did not take his physical, but rather his knowledge. Statements to the effect that they were out of the will, it's not being offered to prove that they in fact were out of the will, but only again to show their state of mind. And her testimony concerning their demeanor, that they looked puzzled and surprised when she indicated the extent of the estate, of the estate certainly would not be hearsay statements.
Could I add a couple of words about relevance of first statement to them?
All right.
The prosecution has introduced in front of Eric Menendez's jury information to Dr. Azil about Eric's supposed knowledge of the value of the estate is $14 or $15 million. I think he testified 14, even on notes at this thing. And this information he's receiving from his Aunt Marta is the source of his knowledge on that issue. In order to explain how he knows on October 31st or November 2nd, I don't remember which state was, about that number, which Mrs. Cano would testified yesterday she gave them. I think it also, with respect to the information in front of Eric's jury, gives some explanation, further explanation to his saying the near disinheritance. If, as she tells us, as Mrs. Cano tells us, Eric and Lyle were of the impression when he started the conversation with her that they were not in the will, and she basically is trying to convince them that they're wrong because of her conversation that she had with their father in April would inform, and it would give meaning to the statement that was elicited from Dr. Azil, where Eric was talking about a, quote, near disinheritance. He believing he was, his aunt telling him he wasn't. So I think for that purpose, certainly the information she's giving him is relevant, is not, and it's being offered to explain his statement later. And therefore the conversation would come in fact, not to the truth of any of it, but only to show what his state of mind is at the time that he's talking to Dr. Azil.
All right, do the people wish to respond?
Well, as far as the Cruz case is concerned, the Cruz case deals with the identical theories that have been raised by the defense in this case, and the only way they can distinguish the Cruz case is to say that this was custodial and our case is not custodial. But as far as the theories propounded, each one of them was identical to the ones offered by the defense in this case. The Cruz case makes no mention of the fact that the defendant is in custody as being the sole turning point upon which it makes its decision. It's just a question of whether or not these statements are trustworthy. And we would submit that although Marta Cano was not a peace officer who had the defendants under arrest, they still had the same motive to indicate to her and to others in the family that they were not, one, involved in the murder, nor did they have any knowledge, particular knowledge about their family's financial affairs. And so they did have a motive to deceive the family at that point, because if they don't get to inherit, other members of the family would have. So I don't think that it's crucial, or it causes people's analysis to fail when Cruz and Edwards, the people under arrest. The same motives to fabricate exist regardless of the situation. And as far as evidence for section 1251, which is a past state of mind, the declarant needs to be unavailable in order for that particular section to apply. People versus Edwards says that a defendant who chooses not to testify is not legally unavailable, so that he may use 1251 in order to avoid testifying. And as far as, there's one more comment I'd like to make. If you look at section 1250B, which is the last sentence of that statute, it says that the section does not make admissible evidence of a statement of memory or belief to prove the fact remembered or believed, which means when the statement comes in, it's not prove the truth of the memory or belief, which means that, in a sense, this is not a precise exception to the hearsay rule. It's dealing more with people's states of mind, and therefore it appears to be dealing not only with hearsay, but with non-hearsay states of mind. So insofar as the defense seeks to avoid the strictures of 1250 to 1252, by virtue of subsection B, it appears that we're dealing with precisely the kind of statements that the defense wishes to classify as non-hearsay in this case. And if you look at Cruz and if you look at Trimble, I think Trimble makes it very clear that 1240 is not an evidence code section which applies to this particular case because it needs to have the strictures of People versus Koji and People versus Trimble require a lot more than was available in this case to make these spontaneous statements. So I think that Cruz, which was cited recently by the California Supreme Court in People versus DeWitt, cited for general propositions, but cited in WHIT, W-H-I-T-T at 51 Cal 3rd 620, is still good law in this state and should control the facts of this particular issue.
Right, is the matter submitted?
Yes.
All right, the court will then proceed with an analysis and ruling on these matters. In regards to the argument that the statements attributed to the defendants are admissible under section 1240 of the evidence code, which is a section of the evidence code which is an exception to the hearsay rule and relates to statements attributed to a declarant which purport to narrate, describe, or explain an act, condition, or event perceived by the declarant and made spontaneously while the declarant was under the stress of excitement caused by the perception. That was the first theory of admissibility articulated by the defense and argued yesterday. And the defense cited the case of People versus Poggi, P-O-G-G-I at 45 Cal 3rd 306. Prosecution cited the case of People versus Trimble at 5 Cal App 4th 1225. And as the parties are aware, and as these cases that I've just cited indicate, the question of admissibility of such statements is largely a question of fact for the trial court in the exercise of its discretion. The theory of admissibility of such statements, which are often referred to as excited utterances or spontaneous declarations, is set forth in the case of People versus Poggi. And essentially, the rationale for the rule of admissibility of spontaneous statements is that the rationale is that the statements were spontaneously made by the declarant under the stress of excitement caused by whatever perceptions were then within the view of the declarant. And Poggi states, quote, to render statements admissible under the spontaneous declaration exception, it is required that there must be some occurrence startling enough to produce this nervous excitement and render the utterance spontaneous and unreflecting. The utterance must have been before there had been time to contrive and misrepresent. That is, while the nervous excitement may be supposed still to dominate and the reflective powers to be yet in advance. And 3, the utterance must relate to the circumstance of the occurrence preceding it. And the underlying rationale for spontaneous statements or excited utterances being admissible is that they occur in such a circumstance that it's such a shocking event presented to the declarant that the declarant's reaction to it, statements in reaction to it, are deemed reliable because the declarant didn't have time to reflect on what the declarant was about to say, and therefore the courts and the legislature in adopting the evidence code have carved out an exception to the hearsay rule relating to and in this particular case, the court would have to and does analyze the situation that has been presented by way of evidence regarding this conversation.
Skating for over 45 years has taken a toll on my body. I take Cunol turmeric because it helps with healthy joints and inflammation support. Why Cunol? It has superior absorption compared to regular turmeric. Cunol, the brand I trust.
And the court is required to determine whether the statements were the product of unreflective nervous excitement and emotion of the moment. I've heard the testimony, and I've reviewed my notes of Mrs. Cano's testimony from yesterday. The defendant's argument in regards to this exception to the hearsay rule is primarily that the defendants had no advance notice of the purpose of the meetings, and there was a sudden revelation of such a nature that it would create a startling and emotional and excited reaction on the part of the defendants in response to what was disclosed by Mrs. Cano. And in looking at the evidence and evaluating it and the nature of the disclosures and the nature of what was said by the defendants, it's quite clear to me that the defendant's statements were not excited utterances or spontaneous declarations as Evidence Code Section 1240 contemplates. These statements do not meet any of the criteria or the foundational elements that would cause the admissibility of any statements attributed to the defendants as excited utterances or spontaneous declarations. Therefore, the court does not find that that exception to the evidence code applies. Nothing said by Mrs. Cano was so startling, exciting, or would produce such excitement or spontaneity to give reliability and cause the exception of Evidence Code Section 1240 to apply. It just does not meet that standard, and the court does so find.
Does the court therefore find that being told you have $15 million didn't make anybody excited?
Well, we'll get to that. The court will review some of the factual underlay of this incident. Some of which is obviously before the jury and before the court, such as the defense offer of proof that the defendants were used to large amounts of spending on their behalf, used to living in large houses throughout the United States, and a house under construction in Calabasas at the same time this house was occupied in Beverly Hills, which certainly would give one some reason to believe that there was a large sum of money available in the estate. Whether it was $14 million or some other amount, still a large amount. That aside, let's look at the facts as they have been presented here in this trial. The shooting and killing of Jose and Mary Louise Menendez occurred on Sunday, August the 20th, 1989. Immediately thereafter, the defendants maintained throughout, as far as the evidence is concerned, that someone else had shot the parents. The defendants had maintained throughout the relevant time frame here that the shooting had been committed by others and that they had just come upon the bodies after the event. The defendants, according to the evidence, made efforts to discard the weapons they used and made efforts to discard the clothing they wore. And this was all done prior to the conversation with Mrs. Cano. And as the defense indicates today, on August the 24th, Thursday morning, the defendants were observed participating in the purchase of, I believe, $14,000 worth of jewelry in Century City. Thursday night was this conversation with Mrs. Cano that has been the subject of this hearing. And looking at the context of this particular conversation in light of sections 1250 and 1251 of the evidence code, which are also offered by the defense as a basis for the introduction of this evidence. 1250 states that evidence of present mental state may be received as an exception to the hearsay rule if it establishes state of mind at the time of the declaration or at any other relevant time. Evidence Code Section 1252 states that mental state evidence is admissible if it's relates to the declarant's mental state and is offered to indicate the mental state at an earlier time, or referred to as Evidence Code Section 1251 at this point, previously existing mental state. And as the people observed, Evidence Code Section 1251 requires that the declarant must be unavailable. It can be argued that the statements that are being offered by the defense are really statements of previously existing state of mind, although they are referred to as a conversation that occurred on August the 24th. It could very well be argued that those are really statements offered by the defense to show the previously existing state of mind that existed on August the 20th, 1989. And if so, as the people argue, the declarant must be unavailable. And obviously, in this case, the declarants, the defendants, are not unavailable to the defense as witnesses. In regards to both Evidence Code Sections 1250 and 1251, there is a requirement relating to trustworthiness. And the Evidence Code states that evidence offered pursuant to Section 1250 and 1251 are not admissible if they lack trustworthiness. And the rationale for that is as outlined by the Supreme Court in the case cited by the defense, the Harris case, and also in the cases cited by the prosecution, the case of People versus Edwards. In the Harris case, the Supreme Court, in its opinion, stated, quote, "A defendant in a criminal case may not introduce hearsay evidence for the purpose of testifying while avoiding cross-examination." And in the Edwards case, the Supreme Court went on to discuss the applicability of sections 1251 and 1250 as it related to that particular fact situation. and the analysis of why there must be trustworthiness for the statements to be admissible. Again, the argument is that a defendant after a crime has time to reflect on what it is that he can say that would be helpful to his defense if arrested, and or also helpful to avoid detection for that matter. And that in analyzing any such statements, if there is that motive of fabrication that is available to the defendant or the declarant, and that was the motivation that caused the declarant to make the relevant statements or the offered statements, then that is a factor to be considered in whether the statements have trustworthiness as defined in section 1252 of the Evidence Code. As counsel are aware, each case must be resolved on the facts as presented to the trial court. And again, this is a determination regarding trustworthiness that is left to the exercise of the trial court's discretion based upon the analysis of the evidence presented. And in analyzing this evidence, the court does consider the factual situation as I've outlined it here as to when these statements were made to Mrs. Cano, the fact that they were made 4 days after the killing of the parents. They were made after some evidence of spending had already occurred in regards to the defendants. The court finds that the rationale of the case of People versus Cruz is equally applicable here in analyzing whether these statements have trustworthiness. The Cruz case, boiled down to its essence, was a situation where the defendant alleged that the killing occurred, a shooting occurred by accident. And that was his defense. And in statements to the police afterwards, he expressed grief at the death of the decedent and attempted to offer that evidence to show, since he was grieving, that was supportive of this claim of claim of accident. And the Court of Appeals concluded that that statement was not trustworthy and would not and should not be received. And that statement was made very shortly after the incident giving rise to the defendant's arrest. The statement was made shortly after his arrest, and his arrest occurred shortly after the incident in question. In this case, the case of People versus Menendez, there was a substantial period of time after the crime on August 20th for the defendants to reflect upon their situation and to fabricate a statement regarding lack of motivation of financial gain involved in the killings. And that is, in essence, what occurred here. So the court finds, based upon the totality of the evidence presented here, that those statements lack trustworthiness and therefore are not admissible under section 1250 or 1251 of the Evidence Code. And I disagree with the argument of the defense that these are really not hearsay statements and not offered for the truth. They offered for the truth of what the defendant said as far as their state of mind. And as such, they are hearsay, and as such, the court finds that they are not admissible. This whole issue, as the defense has presented it to the court, is one which, in essence, doesn't really have that great significance. The defendants indicate that they are going to testify, And some, perhaps all, or at least some of the statements that occurred during this conversation with Mrs. Cano could very well be the subject of examination during the testimony of the defendants. So at that point, the defendants would be subject to cross-examination as to any declarations they made. And that's a separate issue as to what, if any of those statements would be admissible. But at this point, the court is ruling upon this offer of evidence at this stage. The defendants have not testified and are not subject to cross-examination, and that the court finds that these statements do not meet the evidence code sections that have been cited by the defense as authority for their admissibility as exceptions to the hearsay rule. All right, that completes this hearing then.
Judge, could I ask one point of clarification?
Yes.
Is the court ruling without prejudice to renew this offer of proof after the defendants testify?
Well, certainly if this is material to one extent or another that arises during the defendant's examination, then it might very well be relevant to corroborate their testimony. There was some argument here by Ms. Abramson that the source of the $14 million figure was Mrs. Cano. And certainly after the defendants testify, or whichever testifies, that's where they learn that number, then obviously if there's an effort to corroborate that, it would seem that that would be a appropriate grounds of additional evidence. I don't want to go through each statement here because I don't know exactly what the defendants would say when cross-examined or on direct examination as to what would or would not be admissible, but certainly at this stage, the court is only ruling that this evidence cannot be admitted based upon the offer of proof because the defendants are the declarants and they have not met the requirements, the preliminary requirements of admissibility.
I would like to be heard on just to point out what I think is a critical lack of logic in the structuring of the facts that the court has just recited, and that is this. The court is beginning with the premise that the defendants had a motive to fabricate and would fabricate their attitude towards the family money, which is the prosecution's theory is they killed for the money, and the court's position is that their defense is that they didn't kill for the money, therefore they would have a reason to fabricate and conceal, if you would, a money motive. But at the same time, the court says that the fact that they had already indulged in extravagant spending somehow makes these statements about their lack of knowledge of the money less trustworthy. But there's an illogic there because if
So
they...
the logic is in the conduct of the defendants, not in the logic of the court.
Well, what I'm saying is if the court is going to find that the statements are untrustworthy because the court is assuming a plan or a scheme or a reflection, time to reflect and time to think, and a desire to conceal their financial motive, then the fact that they spent $23,000 on jewelry that morning does not support that theory, but counters that theory. It shows that they're not plotting and planning and scheming to conceal an interest in money. Moreover, if their goal in this homicide was to obtain the money, then it certainly doesn't further their goal to try to convince their family that they shouldn't get the money, that they should not be inherited. And so in that sense, this does not flow as logically as it would in Cruz or in Edmonds or in the other cases where someone's in custody and they're being interrogated and they've been accused, and one can always assume under those circumstances a specific motive.
Well, I've made my ruling. I'm satisfied with the underpinnings of it. I could refute your arguments, and I think really what you're arguing is something that ultimately you can argue to the jury, and the people could be in a position to refute if they care to, but I don't think it's necessary for the court to do it. And the court's ruling is as I've announced it. Anything else now before we proceed?
Yes, for the record, Your Honor, we would move to strike all testimony that was elicited in the prosecution's case in chief concerning the life insurance policy or the wills on the basis of the court's ruling. That in light of the court's ruling, we cannot effectively refute that evidence, and therefore that evidence should be stricken under our Fifth, Sixth, and Eighth Amendment rights.
We join in that request.
All right, that motion is denied. And anything else now before we proceed?
No, Your Honor.
Okay, and anything before we have the juries come in? Do we have the juries both here? Okay, then let's get them in and then we'll start.
Skating for over 45 years has taken a toll on my body. I take Cunol turmeric because it helps with healthy joints and inflammation support. Why Cunol? It has superior absorption compared to regular turmeric. Cunol, the brand I trust.
All right, in the trial, we have both juries back in court. Good morning to you all. And unfortunately, we had a delay in the sheriff's transportation this morning, which got us a little bit late in getting started, but we're now ready to proceed. Occasionally, those things happen. It's not the fault of anybody here. It's just occasionally that things like that do happen. But we're now ready to proceed, and we had a witness on the witness stand. Where is she?
She's in the hall here.
All right, if you would get her, please. Would you state your name again for the record?
Sure. Marta, M-A-R-T-A, Menendez, Cano, C-A-N-O.
All right, further direct examination?
Thank you, Your Honor. I want to go back with you for a moment to 1972 when you stayed in Muncie. Okay.
Yes.
During your visit there, did you and your sister-in-law, Kitty Menendez, take some children to a shopping mall?
Yes, we did.
And who were the children that were on that trip?
I believe I had Marta and Eileen with me and Eric and Lyle.
Marta and Eileen are your two oldest daughters?
That is correct.
And did something unusual occur during the course of that shopping trip at the mall?
Yes, it did.
And would you tell us what happened?
The boys were not holding hands with us like I had my two girls at the time. And I mentioned to Kitty, why don't you hold hands? Oh, no, they would be fine. And they were running all over the store, destroying all the dresses. And then all of a sudden, I didn't see Eric and Lyle anymore. And I said, Kitty, where's Eric? Where's Lyle? And she said, oh, don't worry about it. They will be fine.
Let me stop you for a moment. At this time in 1972, Eric was 2 and Lyle was going on 5?
That's right.
Okay, go on.
Marta tried, as a matter of fact, to hold him, but there was no way. I mean, he was used to being wild on the store, so she couldn't hold him.
Marta, by that you mean your oldest daughter?
Marta, my eldest daughter.
And at that time, she was known by her nickname Martika?
That's correct.
Okay. Would you tell us now you don't see Eric or Lyle, is that correct?
That's correct. And
Okay. Just let me ask a question. Do you go looking for them?
I wanted to, but Kitty told me not to worry about it, that they were fine, that they knew what to do if they got lost.
And subsequently to that, did you hear anything over the public address system?
Yes,
Just answer one question at a time.
Sorry.
Okay. And what did you hear over the public address system?
I heard Kitty being called, Mrs. Menendez, to go to the information booth to pick up her children.
And that's what the message was on the. And so, did she then go and pick up the children?
No, she did not.
Did she say anything?
Yes, I said first.
Did you say something to her first?
Yes, I said, oh, Kitty, they found the boys. And then she went ahead and said to me, oh, great, we know where they are, so we can keep on shopping.
And did she keep on shopping?
Yes, she did.
And how long after the announcement that the children were at the information booth was it before she went and got them?
About 45 minutes to an hour.
Now, was this the only time that something like this occurred where the children got lost while shopping?
No, it wasn't.
And was there another occasion about 3 years later?
Yes.
And do you recall where this took place? Was it the same mall in Muncie or another mall?
No, it was a very large mall that she took me that had escalators and all kinds of, I don't know where it was, but it was somewhere upstate New York.
Okay, because they were still living in Muncie at that time?
That's right.
And on this occasion, Eric was 5 and Lyle was about 8?
That's right.
And what happened on this occasion?
Same thing. I was alone with Kitty and the two boys. And
did you have any of your girls with you? Or was it
No,
just...
I did not at the time. I don't think so.
And at some point while you were shopping, the boys disappeared?
They were always running around loose. I mean, that was part of the behavior, normal behavior. And all of a sudden, again, I couldn't rest not seeing the boys. And all of a sudden, I didn't see them. And I said, Kitty, where are the boys? And again, she's just said to me, don't worry, Marta, they'll be fine. They're big guys. They know what they're doing.
Okay, and was there some period of time later when there was again some indication that the boys had been located or someone had them?
Yes.
And on this occasion, did she go and get them right away?
No, she did not. But I had it and I went to meet the boys. I told her I would wait for her in the information booth.
So she had indicated that she wanted to continue to shop again.
She continued. She was about 2 hours that time because I went myself. So she was not worried.
Now, I want to talk to you. You said that went out and about with the boys, they were running around. When they were in their own home, were they running around wild the way they would when they were out shopping?
No, they were not.
Also, staying with 1972 for a moment, during that entire week that you stayed at the Menendez home, I believe I showed you a photograph, a family photograph, and in that photograph, Eric is sitting on his mother's lap. Correct?
That's correct.
Apart from when that photograph was taken, did you at any time during that week see Kitty holding Eric?
No.
Or picking him up?
No. Neither Lyle.
Did she have either of the children ever near her when she was sitting and talking to adults? Did she ever have the children sitting next to her?
No.
Now, you have described some incidents in which you saw your brother being critical or being hostile towards the children. Did you ever see any incidents where Kitty was angry or hostile towards the children?
Yes, many of them.
And what was the typical way, based on your experience over the years, of her demonstrating her anger or hostility towards the boys?
Well, she will go.
Sustain.
Was it always, did she always have the same way of demonstrating anger?
Yes.
And what was that method?
She would all of a sudden get very violent and throw things and bang things and scream at the kids and pick them up by an arm, just like Jose used to do, and shake them and throw them and send them to their room.
Did you ever hear her calling either Lyle or Eric names?
Yes.
And what names do you recall her most frequently using?
Idiot, stupid, clumsy.
And would these outbursts of hers come on gradually? I mean, could you see the steam building, or would she just blow?
No, that's the difference with Jose. She just all of a sudden, she was talking to me and all of a sudden she would just rage out of nowhere.
So with your brother, was it more predictable? Could you see it coming?
Yes.
Did you drive in a car with Kitty Menendez as the driver?
Yes.
Okay, strike that. That wasn't English. Did you ride in a car as a passenger when Kitty Menendez was the driver?
Yes.
And did she have a particular style or method of driving?
I don't know if I would call her style or a method. She was a reckless driver.
Was that occasionally or more
No,
often than occasionally?
That was all the time.
And what do you mean by reckless?
She would accelerate to the end, even if we're going to stop in the corner. She would turn 90-degree angles. She wouldn't look before she turned. She would accelerate, and if she could, we would be 90 miles an hour instantly. It was very uncomfortable.
Do you ever remember seeing any car seats in her car, children's car seats?
No.
Do you remember riding in the car with her in 1972 when Eric was 2 and his being unsecured in the car?
Definitely. The boys were out of the window. They drove with their hands out of the window, pulling them out to get some fresh air, which scared me to death.
Did you ever see the boys or either of them hanging on to a strap to keep from sliding off the seat?
No, they were standing. They were not even sitting.
Was this in 72?
Yes.
And later on, did she obtain a car that had a sunroof?
Yes.
And was there a typical way in which she allowed the children to ride in that car?
Yes.
And would you describe that for the jury?
They would go standing with their whole body, half of their body out the window and on the sunroof with their hands up like the kids do in the roller coasters.
And would she ever tell them to sit down or to sit
No,
still?
she thought it was silly that I didn't like it, that the kids had a lot of fun doing that.
Now, after Eric was about 13, did you see less of him at his sports function, say?
Yes, I did.
And why was that you saw less of him?
I was asked not to go
Asked by whom?
by Kitty.
And would you have, in the past, before that, routinely taken Andy along?
Yes,
And by being asked not to go, did that mean Andy didn't go either?
that's correct.
And at about the same time, was there also a difference in the frequency with which Andy was allowed to stay over at Eric's house?
Yes.
And what happened there? Was it less frequent, more frequent?
Well, Andy would call constantly to go and spend weekends or go and play for an afternoon with Eric. And Kitty will always answer the phone and say that, sorry, Andy, but Eric's very busy. Maybe when his father is out of town, you can come try next weekend.
But the bottom line was that Andy didn't get to go very often. Did he?
No.
Did you ever hear Kitty when she was talking to you about her unhappiness with her marriage, the fact that she didn't feel she came first?
Yes, that was a constant talk.
Did she ever use the phrase, "I'm garbage"?
Yes.
Would you tell us how that fit into that conversation?
Well, I used to minimize it. I used to say, oh, Kitty, don't feel bad. I mean, it's just that Jose is so obsessed with the boys that, oh, he thinks of that, but he loves you and he cares for you. And she says, I don't think so, Marta. Sometimes I feel like garbage.
And did she say that on more than one occasion?
Yes.
Now, way back when you first started testifying, you had made mention of a discussion that you had with your brother in about 1987, where he was describing how he perceived Eric.
That's correct.
Now, was this a discussion in person or over the telephone?
No, it was over the telephone.
And was the basic topic of this discussion your son?
That's correct.
You were talking about Andy and schools for Andy?
That's correct.
All right. But somehow in that discussion, your brother started talking about Eric.
He felt that maybe I should not put Andy in a private school, that, for example, with Eric, when he took him out of PDS, had been sort of better because Eric wasn't as strong and as powerful. He was too soft and too tender and too mediocre to go, and he felt better in the public school than in the private school, that maybe I should do the same with Andy.
So he started talking about matching children to schools and then gave you this description of Eric as soft and weak and tender.
Right.
That's a meeting and calls for conclusion. Questions been asked and answered.
Well, you also misstated it, so objection sustained.
Was softness and tenderness in the way your brother was describing Eric, did that sound like those were compliments or
No.
were those criticisms?
No, that was
Cause for speculation and a conclusion on part of the witness.
Sustained.
Well, what was his tone of voice when he's saying this?
Jose for years had been very aggravated with Eric's softness and tenderness and ridiculous crying and sensitivity. And
Who's
he had
described as unresponsive, Your Honor?
Sustained. The answer is stricken.
Were there other occasions upon which your brother complained to you about Eric's weak personality?
many times.
And had he referred to him in the past as too tender, too soft?
Definitely.
And did those descriptions of Eric as sensitive, tender, soft, did that comport with what you saw in Eric?
Objection, this state's testimony.
Overall.
Yes.
Now, after your strike that. At some point after Sunday, August 20th, 1989, did you learn that your brother and sister-in-law had been killed?
Yes.
And did you then come to California?
Yes, I did.
And how soon after you learned of their death did you come?
As soon as I could.
Well, when was that?
Within 3 hours.
On what day did you learn of their death?
At 9 o'clock in the morning, East Coast time, on the 21st, Monday.
And were you in California Monday afternoon?
Yes.
And when you got to California, where did you go?
I went straight to the Bellage Hotel.
The
Bellage, I'm sorry. Yes.
Belage. Is that
Okay.
the place?
Yes.
And was that a place where other Menendez and Anderson family members were staying?
Yes.
And how long did you stay in Los Angeles on that trip?
Until Friday night.
And that was Friday night, the 25th?
That's correct.
And on Friday night, the 25th, where did you go?
The whole family, including myself, went to Princeton, New Jersey for the funeral.
And was there a memorial service here in Los Angeles before the funeral in Princeton?
Yes.
And what was the day of the memorial service here?
Friday morning, same day at 11 o'clock in the morning.
Friday the 25th.
That's correct.
And what was the day of the funeral in Princeton?
It was Monday. So it was Monday. I believe that it was around 11 o'clock in the morning as well.
That was the 27th?
That is correct.
Okay. Now, when you got here on Monday, did you, at any time on that day, did you see Eric or Lyle?
I don't recall. I don't think I saw them that day.
Did you see Eric or Lyle on Tuesday?
Yes.
And where did you see them on Tuesday?
I saw them at the Bellage. Eric came with Mark Hefferman. Lyle came before on his own.
And were they with other people as well as Mark? Were they with relatives?
Yes.
Was there talking among the relatives?
Yes.
Did you have any time alone with them on that day?
No.
On the next day, at some point on Tuesday, did you go to Jose's business office?
Yes, I did.
Overall,
And was that an office at Live, L-I-V-E, Entertainment?
That is correct.
And where was that office located at that time?
Here in Van Nuys.
And did you spend a portion of Tuesday at his office?
Yes, I did.
And did you have a conversation, without telling us what, with his secretary, Marzi Eisenberg?
Yes, I did.
And with Ms. Eisenberg present, did you look through your brother's papers?
Yes, I did.
And did you continue to do that on part of the day Wednesday as well?
Yes, I did.
And did you, as a result of looking through those papers, write up a document?
Yes, I did.
Did you also remove some of those papers and maintain them?
Yes, I took all the files.
One of my favorite supplements is Cunol turmeric. Turmeric helps with healthy joints and inflammation support, and Cunol has the #1 doctor recommended form of turmeric. Cunol, the brand I trust.
And was there some specific information that you were trying to gather as a financial planner?
Yes, I was.
And was that information about the assets and the liabilities of your brother's estate?
That's correct.
Now, at some point on Wednesday or Thursday, did you set up an appointment to talk to Eric and Lyle?
Yes.
And did you approach them and tell them something?
I told them that.
counsel, the court sustains its objection at this point.
And did you have a private meeting with them at some point?
Yes, I did.
And what was the day, to the best of your recollection, of the private meeting?
Thursday, early evening.
And was that the first time you had been alone with Eric and Lyle, or either of them, from the time you came in on Monday?
Yes.
Now, without getting into it, Did you tell Eric and Lyle what the purpose of the meeting was before the meeting?
Sustain.
Your Honor, I'd like to ask this question as a foundation for future testimony. Well, I'm not going to get into the meeting.
Foundation for what?
Future testimony.
All right, if you can answer that question, yes or no?
No,
No, you didn't tell them the purpose.
no.
Now, were your sister, Terry Baralt, and her husband, Carlos Baralt, here in Los Angeles for that same period of time that you were, Monday to Friday?
Yes,
And to your knowledge, were they the executors of your brother's will?
yes, they were.
Were you a witness on your brother's will?
Yes, I was.
And were you aware that that will had been written in 1981?
Yes, I was.
Now, were you aware during that week that you were in Los Angeles that your brother had an insurance policy with Sun Life Insurance?
Yes, I did.
And in fact, were you the person who was the broker for that insurance policy?
That is correct.
And when was it that you had basically sold your brother that insurance policy?
In 1986.
Now, had you ever discussed the existence of that insurance policy with either Eric or Lyle before your brother's death?
No, as a matter of fact, I had not ever
Okay, you've
discussed it.
answered the question.
You can just say no.
No.
Had you at any time before your brother's death ever heard Eric and Lyle themselves discussing any insurance policy?
No.
During that week that you were in Los Angeles from Monday to Friday, did you file a claim against that insurance policy?
Yes, I did.
And did you do that before or after any discussion you might have had with Eric and Lyle about that policy?
I did it before while I was at Life Entertainment.
So without even discussing it with them, you just filed the claim?
That is correct.
Did you have, in fact, the paperwork on that policy?
It was in my office, and I called my secretary, and she faxed it to Sun Life.
It was in your office in Florida.
That's correct.
When you went through Jose Menendez's papers at his office, was there any copy of that policy there?
No.
Was there any reference to the policy
No, I
there?
looked for it, and it wasn't there.
Now, when you filed this claim, were you claiming on behalf of the contingent beneficiaries?
That is correct.
And were Eric and Lyle the contingent or second beneficiaries?
Yes, they were.
Did you tell anybody else in the family that you were doing this before you did it?
No.
I might have a moment, Sharon.
Yes.
Did you maintain any kind of written record that showed the exact date upon which you had the meeting with Lyle and Eric?
Yes.
You have
Oh,
for
no,
the date?
sorry. No.
Okay. Is there any uncertainty in your mind about whether the meeting was on Wednesday or Thursday?
Yes.
Your Honor, if we might approach briefly concerning scheduling.
All right.
Thank you.
All right. Well,
Two matters. I just needed to mark a couple of photographs.
all right.
You recall testifying, Mrs. Cano, that you were in your brother's office when he was at RCA on two occasions when you overheard him calling home and giving detailed instructions and asking detailed
Yes, I did.
questions. And I'd like to mark a photograph. Where are we? 180.
186.
Thank you. And that's an 8 by 10 black and white photograph. I also want to mark another photograph, 187. And that's a smaller photograph of Eric Menendez, approximately 9. Showing you first the black and white photograph is this picture of how your brother looked during that time when he worked for RCA, when you described the phone calls.
Yes.
He pretty much maintained that look throughout his life, did he not?
Yes, he did.
And now remember describing a story for us about when you and Kitty were going shopping and Eric was homesick.
Yes.
And does this photograph 187 accurately depict what Eric looked like at that age?
Yes, he looks a little bit fuller there, but he was like that.
This was about the same age
Just a little thinner.
at episode. He was thinner on the day that he was sick?
Yes.
And finally, one other matter. Have you seen today a police report from the Beverly Hills Police Department dated August 19th, 1993?
Yes, I did.
And is this a police report that purports to contain a conversation between yourself and Detective Zoller back in October of 1989?
That's correct.
Now, in fact, from the period of August 21st, for several months after that, did you have frequent telephone contact with Detective Zoller?
Yes, I did.
Were you making some efforts to be of assistance to him?
That is correct.
Were you giving him names and information?
Yes, I was.
I'm sorry, I'm going to beg the court's indulgence. I just remembered an entire area that I meant to go into that I forgot, so. Yeah, that too. When you first got to Los Angeles in the week of August 21st, had you already received some kind of indication that the police were interested in or pursuing a theory of who was responsible for your brother's death?
Yes.
And where had you received that information from?
Marcy.
Overall.
Okay, so Marcy told you
My
something.
brother's secretary, when she called me and informed me about Jose's death, she told me, I asked her
Okay,
what.
without anything further.
That's fine. I'm not asking you for what Marcy told you, but
Okay.
you had in mind that the police's investigation was taking a particular path or direction. Is
Yes.
that correct? And did you have a number of conversations with the police where you were talking about the notion that Jose's death may have been related to business
Correct.
and may have been related to some underworld types in the business?
That's right.
And do you specifically recall a conversation with Detective Zoller at the Hamburger Hamlet restaurant on Sunset on some day in October of 1989?
I remember going for lunch with him.
Can you now remember 4 years later what
No.
that conversation
No,
was?
I did not.
And you're aware of the fact that this report dated August 19th, 1993 is the only memorialization of supposedly of that conversation. Have you ever seen any other police report or notes that purported to contain a conversation between yourself and Detective Zoller?
No. No, they were all informal.
You had informal talks with him.
Yes.
Did you ever see any notes of his relating to your conversations?
I don't recall seeing any.
Do you recall asking me as recently as 2 weeks ago, how come? This is the only time you've seen a police report that claims to have a conversation between yourself and Detective Zoller.
That's correct.
And in the course of this, according to this police report, so we'll strike that. Do you recall talking to Detective Zoller, whether on this day at the Hamburger Hamlet or in your phone calls, about one of your brother's business connections, one of the businesses that he had been involved in.
Yes,
And do you recall talking about people, Morris Levy and Noel Bloom?
yes.
And was it your belief at this time, based on what you originally heard from Morrissey, that they were suspects?
Yes.
In October of 1989, did you have any reason to believe that Lyle and Eric were responsible for this?
Not at all.
Now, in the course of talking to Detective Zoller, whether on this day or another day, did you ever tell him, did you ever describe your brother's family to him in very positive terms?
I'm sure I did.
And let me read you, for example, did you ever describe your brother's family as close and loving?
Close, yes. Loving, I wouldn't say that. It could be that that was his conclusion of my conversation.
Okay.
But it could be. I mean, at the time, I had no reason to disclose Jose's truth and change anything that he always wanted to portray. I didn't want to do that.
Let me ask you this. You've testified here for a day and some about a lot of behaviors of your brothers and your sister-in-laws that you didn't like.
Right.
Did you tell the police about the treatment that you saw your brother and sister-in-law impose on their children?
I didn't tell anybody.
But why didn't you tell that to the police
Because
in 1989?
It would break the image that I know Jose and Kitty always wanted to give, and I had no reason to do that.
Okay, you didn't have any reason to believe that at that time that those things that you saw had led to their death?
No, not at all.
Did you discover after your brother and sister-in-law's death that there were things that had been concealed from you by them over the course of their life?
Objection calls for hearsay.
Did you learn things about their family after they died that you didn't know when they were alive?
Same objection and irrelevant.
Had you ever heard from your brother or your sister-in-law when they were alive that Eric had any kind of learning problems?
Objection asked and answered.
Did you know about your brother's 8-year affair while he was alive?
Objection is to the fact not known.
Sustained.
Did you ever know before your sister-in-law died why she was taking those pills?
Objection calls for speculation, calls for hearsay.
It asks if she has personal knowledge.
Objection sustained.
Did you have personal knowledge of why Kitty was taking Valium?
Objection
No.
Calls for
sustained.
speculation.
The answer is no. Objection sustained anyway. Next question, please.
Did you ever stay over at the house on Elm Drive?
Yes,
And was that a very large house?
yes.
I would like to show the witness some photographs from it if I could.
How much longer are you going to be with this witness? You indicated that you had completed your examination.
I think it's going to be another 10 minutes.
On what subjects? Approach the sidebar, please.
One of my favorite supplements is Cunol turmeric. Turmeric helps with healthy joints and inflammation support, and Cunol has the #1 doctor recommended form of turmeric. Cunol, the brand I trust.
Also indicate they have a brief further direct examination showing a couple of pictures and asking a couple of questions of the witness, and then they'll have cross-examination.
I'm not sure about the couple of questions, but
That's what you indicated.
they always grow. Were you aware, Mrs. Cano, that there was an investigation of the deaths of your brother and sister-in-law instigated by Live Entertainment?
Yes, I did.
And was that to try to deal with the issue of whether it was business-related?
Yes,
And were you familiar with a firm of private investigators called Palladino and Sutherland?
is that the one that called me on the phone?
Yeah, that's the one that called you on the
Yes.
phone. And in fact, in February of 1990, were you interviewed over the telephone by somebody from that firm?
Yes.
And did you talk to them about some of the same information that you had talked to Detective Zoller about these business contacts of your brothers that you were suspicious about?
Yes, I did.
Now, did you say flattering things about your brother to this investigator over the telephone?
I probably did.
Did you tell them, for example, that your brother was moral and ethical to the extreme?
That was the picture Jose wanted to portray, and I was not going to change it for any other reason.
Did you think your brother was moral to the extreme?
I thought he was in the business world. I knew he wasn't in the family world.
Did you also tell them that your brother was undefeatable? The only way to get rid of Jose was to kill him?
Yes, and I do believe that.
And were you, in talking about one of these business connections, did you even mention to Palladino that your brother was sarcastic and put this person down?
Yes.
And was that, let's strike that. Did you see your brother being sarcastic, being a put-down artist with adults as well as children?
He did that all the time. Anytime anyone tried to defy him, he would humiliate them and ridicule them and win.
Was your brother in your family held up as an idol, an ideal, something to aspire to?
Yes, because he was extremely successful in the business world.
Now, did you also tell Palladino and Sutherland that, with respect to your brother and his children, that your brother would tell them what to do and what not to do, that he gave them no choices?
That's correct.
Did you also, however, tell them that the boys couldn't have been more loved and pampered?
I'm not sure I said it that way because they were never loved and pampered, but I probably told them that they had everything they wanted or needed to want. You know, materialistic things, they had them all.
Well, do you think that in talking to these investigators, you were trying to paint a rosy but untrue picture of the family?
I'm sure I was.
Did you also, however, tell them that the boys were very good kids?
Yes, they were.
Did you also tell them that neither boy is much of a talker? That's how they were raised, just like their parents, very reserved, very private.
That's correct.
Your Honor, I have nothing further with leave of court so that it won't delay things. I'll show the photographs during redirect. Would that be easier?
Only if the purpose is to show photographs and nothing else. If there's
Yeah.
going to be extensive examination on any events that occurred when she was at the house, then I want you to do it now.
No, they won't be.
All right, cross-examination.
Mrs. Cano, at the time that you spoke to Detective Zoller, specifically at the Hamburger Hamlet, were you aware of the fact that he was trying to solve the murder of your brother and your sister-in-law?
Of course I was.
And did you think that,
Object to the use of the word murder, Your Honor. That's for the juries to decide.
Overruled.
did you think that that was something that was important? It was,
Yes.
and at that time, you gave him information which now it seems you knew to be misleading. Is that correct?
I wouldn't say that. I just omitted certain issues that I did not see any reason to reveal at the time.
Okay, did you tell him that Jose did everything for Eric and Lyle?
That is correct. He even instructed them what to say.
He would often travel with them as a family to various parts of the United States to watch their involvement in tennis. Did you tell Detective Zoller that?
Not exactly to watch the involvement, but to tell them how to play tennis. Yes. To be part of their tennis match. Yes.
Did you also tell him or describe the family as being close and loving?
They were close. They were not loving. I
What-
could not have said that. I know that that's part of that. And I believe that that was probably a conclusion from Dr. Zoller from saying that they were always together. Yes, they were always together.
You want to help the defendants in this case, don't you?
Not necessarily. I have my own personal integrity. And remember, I'm talking against my brother here. I'm not talking against a stranger.
You also told Detective Zoller asked you, did he not, if you knew of any problems within the family, and you said no.
That is correct. The problems that I knew, I did not think at the time had anything to do with the killings, and I would reserve them because Jose never wanted to portray that out to the outside.
But Jose was dead at that point, is that correct?
That is correct, but his image was still there.
And you didn't think that the things that you've described to this jury were problems enough to tell Detective Zoller about, is that correct?
I am sorry, could you repeat that question?
Well, you've told this jury about several instances in which you viewed either Mr. Menendez or Mrs. Menendez mistreating their children. Would that be a fair characterization?
That is correct.
And you didn't think that was important to tell Detective Zoller when you spoke to him on October of '89?
No, he didn't ask me any on those issues. If he would have asked me, maybe I would have said something to him, but he didn't ask me any questions on those issues.
But it was your intent when you talked to Detective Zoller to paint a rosy picture.
It was my intent to continue to portray my brother's and his family's image. Yes, it was.
And when you talked to the Palladino investigators, you tried to paint the same picture.
That is correct.
And now you're trying to paint a different picture.
No, now I'm saying the truth.
Okay, so before you didn't tell the truth.
I omitted certain issues of the truth because, as I said, at that time, I did not have to carry with the conscience that if I didn't say the truth, horrible things could happen.
And are you saying that you feel differently now?
I don't feel different. I feel exactly the same way. I just know things that I didn't know before, and I have to have the integrity to say what I know.
And you didn't have the integrity to say what you knew before.
I've always talked with integrity. I just omitted issues that he never asked me direct. As a matter of fact, if you see on the detectives, the other person that interrogated me, he did ask me how did they behave, and I told him that they were very secretive. I didn't say that to Zoller. He never asked me.
Now, in October of 1989, I believe you indicated in your direct examination that you had no reason to suspect the defendants. Is that correct?
That's definitely correct.
So all of the mistreatment that you had observed over the years did not, in your mind, provide any kind of motivation. Is that correct for them to have done the killings?
Rephrase the question.
In October of 1989, you were aware of all these incidents of mistreatment, which you've told the jury about
That is
today.
correct.
And that information was all done because the parents were dead as of October of '89. In other words, you had witnessed all these things prior to October of '89.
Yes, and I still think that they would
Wait.
not have killed him for that alone.
Okay, but that is your opinion. That is
Right.
correct?
That is correct.
So the fact that of all these things going on did not cause you to be suspicious. Is that correct?
No, they were very good kids.
I take it you love your nephews very much.
I do, and so I do love my brother. And
Okay, well, the question is, do you love your nephews?
yes, I do.
Your brother and Mrs. Menendez are gone,
Not in my memory,
but they're gone. They're dead.
in your mind, not in mine.
And you want to help these defendants, don't you?
I want to say the truth about the defendants. I think I have a need and an obligation to reveal the truth.
Why didn't you tell Detective Zoller the truth when you talked to him in October of
The
'89?
boys were not at stake at the time.
So since they're at stake, it's then that you will paint this picture.
Again, the same thing I said to you. I didn't lie to him. I just deviated portraits of image. I did not reveal personal details that I knew that were confidential reports. I didn't reveal them to anyone that knew me.
When you were asked by Detective Zoller if you knew of any problems within the family, you said no.
He was referring to other kinds of problems.
Well, did you think that the things that you've told this jury about, both the juries about, do you think those were problems?
Those were mistreatments and definitely were issues, but I didn't see them as problems in reference to threaten my brother's life.
I believe you indicated that on one occasion when you were coming back from, I think it was Eric's graduation from high school, that Kitty Menendez got in an accident. She asked you to lie for her, to
That is
Jose.
correct.
And you did that, didn't you?
Yes, I did.
And you,
Very embarrassingly wise.
but
I did.
you lied to help Kitty.
I wouldn't put it that way. I would have done it for you too. I mean, it was a matter of avoiding a confrontation with Jose. That's the way I understood it. And the last thing I wanted to do on Eric's graduation was to set up an issue that apparently was an issue according to Kitty's behavior.
Okay, so you were willing to lie about what happened to the car, is that correct?
I find that a very minor detail. I was not in anyone's life at stake. If their lives would be today, I would not be lying. Whether it's in their behalf or not, I would not be lying.
Now, I believe you've told the juries about several instances of bad conduct by your brother and by your sister-in-law. Would that be a fair characterization?
Would you rephrase that?
Yes. You've talked about many things that your brother did to his sons that were mistreatment in your mind, correct?
That's correct.
And you also testified to many things about Mrs. Menendez, too.
That is correct.
Do you have anything nice to say about your brother? Were there any good characteristics that he had?
His total dedication to his children, which became an obsession and a possession, unfortunately. If it would have been only a total dedication, I would have admired it all my life because they did have, both of them, total dedication. The problem is it became a sick type of obsessive dedication.
Well, what I wanted to know is, did they have any positive character traits? Either one of them?
I believe that's a positive thing. To be dedicated to your children is very positive.
But I believe you've indicated that it became an obsession, which is a negative character trait.
Unfortunately, it did.
Do you have anything positive to say about your brother?
He was an admirable person. He controlled every business negotiation he would encounter. He would control every single conversation that we were into. He would manage to have the right words to ridicule and intimidate and humiliate and manipulate anyone that was present so he could control. So in my eyes, believe it or not, I admired his ability to control and to turn things around to his behalf and to his favor. I did admire that. He was unbelievable.
You admire that in him?
Of course.
Okay, what about
I
Mrs.
didn't admire that manipulation, but I admire his ability to do that.
What about Mrs. Menendez? Is there anything about her that you liked? Or
I
anything?
admire her. She was a tremendous athlete. She was very strong. She could pick up a Christmas tree and move it from one place to the other and didn't have to wait until her husband came home to do it, which I couldn't do. I admire that strength. I admire the fact that she was intelligent and she was a handyman and she could put together a barbecue. I remember once we bought a barbecue and I didn't know where to start and she had no problem putting it together and getting the right tools. And I admire all that on her. She was great on that. She was very she had a tremendous amount of abilities.
So you admire the fact that she was physically strong, correct?
Yes,
That she was intelligent
that's correct.
and that she had mechanical ability.
That is correct.
Now, I believe you indicated on your direct examination that you lived in Puerto Rico for the 14 years prior to 1979. Is that
That is
correct?
correct.
So from 1965 to 1979.
That is correct.
And I believe you indicated you stayed with your brother for 1 week in 1972. Is that correct?
That is correct.
And between 1972 and 1979, on how many occasions did you see your brother interact with his family?
Every Christmas and every summer.
Okay, I believe the summer vacations were for 2 weeks.
I went from 2 weeks to a month, depending, always went in the month of July and spent, I stayed at Terry's, but they lived within 5 miles.
So the only time that you actually lived in the Menendez home during that period of time when you were residing in Puerto Rico was the 1 week in 1972.
That's the only one I recall.
Did you ever live in the Menendez home again for any period of time, including an overnight stay, between 1979 and the time of their deaths in 1989?
I stayed overnight when I was moving.
And when was that?
That was in 1986.
And was that at the Princeton house?
That is correct.
And how long did you stay there in 1986?
I'm sorry?
How many nights did you spend there while you were moving?
Just one night. Jose was on a trip and Kitty was alone in the house.
All right, so the total number of nights that you spent in the house would be the 1 week in 1972 and the one night in 1986.
To sleep, yes.
And then I believe you indicated you spent some time in Beverly Hills. Is that correct?
Yes, I came for a week within Eric's graduation time.
Did you spend the? Did
I
you stay
spent
at?
1 week at the house, yes.
So that it would be 2 weeks during the course of 17 years and one night when you were moving.
Yes, but we were a very close family. We interrelated and got together many, many times.
I believe you indicated on one occasion that Eric Menendez was, I believe you said, a toddler or a baby, and that he was running around in the woods outside of the house. Do you remember your testimony in that regard?
Yes, I do.
Were there other cousins of his around him at that time?
That was a danger, that there were kids from all ages, and he was the baby. He was 2, and there were kids 4, 5, 7, which were not looking after him. They were too small as well, and they were playing rough.
All right, and so the oldest child involved was 7 years old?
The boys were playing, which was Peter, Eric, and Lyle, and Peter was only 2 years older than Lyle, and Lyle was 5, so we're talking Peter 7, 5, and 2.5. I mean 2, not even 5. Lyle was not 5 yet.
And
And Peter had just turned 7 because Peter was born in December 65.
So Peter was not old enough to look after a child?
They were not looking after anybody. They were playing hide and seek and running and hitting one another. I don't call that looking, it's not a sitting down playing.
I believe there were some photographs on the board yesterday showing Eric as a baby holding on to some bars. Is that
That's
correct?
right. That's right.
Those photographs, do you know where they were taken or when?
I know that they were taking at that time. I know from Eric's age. I mean, during that time. Plus, at the time, Jose used to brag about the fact that he would take the boys to the gym and make them strong, showing them all this strength in the bars.
But you weren't personally present when the photograph was taken, were you?
No, I was not presently taken. That's a gym bar, and I think I stated that I had never been at the gym.
I believe you testified about some driving on Mrs. Menendez's part. At the time, did she have seat belts installed in her car
Of course.
in 1972?
Of course. She had top of the line cars, and they all had seats in the back seat and the front seat. I had my kids put the seat belts because I didn't feel comfortable
Didn't she have?
leaving them loose there.
Didn't she have an older model Jaguar?
No, it was not a Jaguar. I don't know what kind of car it was, but I think it was a Buick. I'm not sure, but I recall it was a Buick. I'm not sure of that. It was a big car. It was not a Jaguar.
I believe you indicated during your testimony and just recently that Mrs. Menendez was a strong woman. Is that-
Very so.
Now, between 1986 and 1989, how many times did you see Kitty Menendez? 1986 is the year that you moved to Florida and they moved to California. Is that correct?
I saw them several times.
One of my favorite supplements is Cunol turmeric. Turmeric helps with healthy joints and inflammation support, and Cunol has the #1 doctor recommended form of turmeric. Cunol, the brand I trust.
Well, several times a year.
From 86 to 89, I
Yes.
saw them in Christmas. Christmas 86, I don't think they attended. I think they didn't go and meet with us. But I saw them in February 87 when my father died, and I saw them in September 87 when my daughter Marta got married, and I saw them in April 87 when they went to Florida for the Easter Bowl, which they attended every year.
April 87 or
I
80?
believe so. I think they went 87, 88, and 89.
So you saw them on those occasions?
That's correct.
Did you see them Christmas of 88?
As a matter of fact, let me get back. Christmas 86, they went to New Jersey. I didn't because it was the last Christmas of my father, so I remember that. I did not attend that Christmas myself. Christmas 88, we were together.
How many months?
Maybe not. I don't recall really. I mean, I know at the time they were not attending to many Christmases anymore, so I can't recall exactly if it was 88, the one that I didn't see them, or if it was 87. I think we met in 87. That's it. We met in 87 after my father's death. We were all there for Christmas. We were not together in 88.
And these Christmases you've talked about, were they celebrated on the East Coast?
They were celebrated at Terry's, yes. They used to be celebrated at Jose's when they lived in the East Coast, but when they moved, we celebrate them at Terry's.
How many months before their deaths was it that you last saw the Menendezes? Was it
June, the end of June 1989.
So at that time, was Kitty still a strong woman?
Oh, yes.
Now, I believe you indicated that you moved to the East Coast in 1979 from Puerto Rico, and you stayed there until your move to Florida in 1986. Is that correct?
I'm sorry, could you repeat it again? I was
Yeah.
someplace
You
else.
moved from Puerto Rico to the East Coast in 1979,
Right.
and you stayed there until 1986 when you moved to Florida, correct?
That is correct.
Who moved out of New Jersey first, the Menendezes or you?
I did.
And do you remember what month you moved?
Sure. I moved in June 1986, and Jose, I believe, moved in October, September, October. My daughter Marianne stayed that summer with them because I was gone, so I'm sure that they moved after me.
Now, during that period of time, 1979, 1986, were you aware of the fact that relatives, cousins of the Menendezes would spend the summer, various cousins spent the summers at their home?
I'm only aware of one that spent the summer there,
And who was that?
Alicia.
Alicia?
Yes, after Marianne left or something, I think Alicia stayed there babysitting the house.
All right, now I'm referring to the years between 1979 and 1986.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay.
Before you moved to Florida.
Yes.
Were you aware that cousins on Mrs. Menendez's side came and stayed for the summer or longer at the Menendez home?
Sure.
Do you remember which ones?
I saw Diane very much. Diane is the one that I really remember the most. I don't remember Alan.
You don't remember Alan at all?
Not myself, no. I don't think Alan was there after 79.
How about Kathy?
No,
You don't remember her either?
no, I don't think she was there after 79. Not that I saw her anyway. If she was there, it was a very short period of time because I did not see her.
Did you ever see your brother strike his children?
With his hand, once I did see it.
And who did he strike and what year, if you can recall?
It was Eric, and it was after a soccer game. He was angry because Eric had been a sissy.
And that was the only time you
And
ever...
he just struck him on the side and
Where?
pushed him on his side. He just hit him hard. But the kid lost his balance.
He hit him on the arm?
Yes.
Did you ever see your brother hit Lyle?
Not hit him.
Okay. Did you ever see your your sister-in-law hit either of her children?
Kitty would throw things at them.
Did you ever see her hit them with her hand?
They would move out of the way of the object that she was throwing.
Did you ever see her hit them with her hand?
With her hand, yes, I saw her hit Lyle once with her hand.
How old was Lyle when she did that?
12, 13,
Was there a period of time where Lyle was disrespectful to his mother?
yes.
Could you tell me when that started?
That started in his teenage years. He sort of started resenting his mother. I felt that,
You got to move to strike, started resenting as a
I'm
conclusion on the
sorry,
part of the witness.
that was my,
I believe you indicated then when he started to become a teenager, what age would you say?
I would say he was about 14. By the time he had a girlfriend, more or less.
And what would he do to his mother to show disrespect? What actions?
He would not obey her. He would answer back to her. He would talk very rude to her, very unrespectful.
Did you see that kind of behavior continue in him past the age of 14?
Yes.
When was the last time you saw Lyle being rude or disrespectful to his mother?
The last time was at the Princeton Avenue house in 1986, right before they were on the process of moving, which I stated when Kitty made that comment to me that.
Okay, you've answered the question. So that was 1986. Lyle was 18 years old at the time. Is that correct?
That's correct. I also saw him with her in 1989 when I went to Eric's graduation, but Lyle didn't attend the graduation with us. Lyle showed up very sloppily later at the back of the graduation. He was not with the family that day. I knew something was happening.
Move to strike. I knew something was happening as a conclusion on the part of the witness and non-responsive. Now, when you saw Lyle at Eric's graduation, did he continue to treat his mother in a disrespectful manner?
I saw him interact with both his father and mother very little. As a matter of fact, I saw Lyle. I stopped at Mass, and he was there.
Yeah, you can
No.
answer the question, yes or no.
Stain, the answer is, we asked the question.
Could you repeat the
Yeah, the
question?
question is, when you were at the house for Eric's graduation in 1989, did you or did you not see Lyle treat his mother disrespectfully?
I don't recall, really. I don't recall seeing him. Didn't see him much.
Mrs. Cano, I believe you've indicated just recently in your testimony that you saw Mrs. Menendez throw things at her children.
Yes.
Did you ever report her for child abuse?
No, you don't do that with your sister-in-law unless the boy is hurt. I mean, you just don't do that. I knew that was out of hand, but in my mind, I tried to diminish it because I just didn't want to believe that of Kitty.
But you saw it.
Yes, I did.
So it wasn't someone else telling you about it. You actually saw it.
No, I saw it and I found it completely out of hand, and I did feel that she needed some help on her aggressive way of uncontrolled temper.
So what did you do to get her help?
I told her that she should go to a psychologist, that it was not normal behavior, and she looked at me very upset. She didn't like my comment.
You also gave her Valium, didn't you?
She asked me for Valium, and I told her I had some and that she could take it because I didn't take it.
So you gave her your Valium, is that
That
correct?
is correct.
Is
I
that
have
a-
been prescribed Valium once, and I never took it.
The incidences that you've related to these juries, did you ever discuss them with other members of your family, like your sister Terry or your mother?
Yes, they were always discussed about the cruelty and the aggressiveness of Jose and Kitty treating the kids. Yes.
And so at some point, did you decide to intervene and try to get help for
No,
these-
because I had no idea that it went further than that. All that we saw was cruel and was wrong. But, in the society that we live, you can't just go to the police and say the kid is being pulled. I see that in jail every day when I go, and the jail people are there and they don't do anything about it.
Everything starting with when she goes to jail. Aside from going to the police, did you ever think of going for any kind of professional help for these?
I'm going to object at this point that this is irrelevant. It's not her job.
Council, let's not argue with objection on the grounds of relevancy. I have another question.
It's irrelevant.
The question was, did you and your other family members ever try to go to a psychologist or someone aside from the police for help?
Objection overruled.
I did tell Kitty, and I did mention, we did discuss in the family several times that Kitty should go to a psychologist because it was not normal behavior, the way she behaved with the boys. Yes, we did.
What about Jose going to a psychologist? Did you ever discuss that?
It's interesting, we did, and Jose was such an image that my mother had always justified anything Jose did, so we just, in our mind, I knew that Jose was very aggressive, but I didn't.
Now, I believe you indicated that you had been a teacher for 14 years.
Yes, I was.
Did you have training in dealing with child psychology?
Yes, I did.
I believe you indicated there was an incident when Eric was 8 or 9 and that you went over to pick up Mrs. Menendez to go shopping and you discovered that Eric had a fever. Is that correct?
That's right. It's the time of this picture, as a matter of fact.
And I take it you were upset by the fact that Eric had a fever. Is that correct?
I wasn't exactly upset. I was concerned.
And so you told Mrs. Menendez, did you not, well, I'm not going to go shopping with you because I'm not going to help you to leave this child here.
No, I didn't say that. I told her, Kitty, we don't have to go shopping. We can go another day. As a matter of fact, it was her invitation to take me shopping and for lunch at New Hope. I told her, Kitty, we don't have to go today. I can go another day. And she told me, oh, no, Marta, there's no need. He'll be fine.
So you went shopping with her.
Yes, I did.
So you didn't refuse to go shopping in spite of the fact that Eric had this fever.
I didn't want
Argumentative.
to hurt her feelings. She seemed to be convinced that Eric would be fine.
I believe you indicated there was an incident where you were going to go out of town and your son Andy was about 7.5 years old. And you went to drop him off at the Menendez home and found that the only person in attendance was Eric.
That is correct.
And so he would have been about 9 or 9.5 at that time. Is that correct?
It was during the spring of 80, so
Well,
80, 81, I don't remember. Probably. Yeah, I don't recall. He was around 9 years old.
So he's
He
2
was
years.
not 10, I know that. He was small. He was 8 or 9.
I believe you indicated then that you waited at the house until Mrs. Menendez came home. Is that
That's
correct?
correct.
At that point, did you leave your son at the house?
Yes, I did. Yes, I did. I was not able to go to where I was going to go, but I went shopping for a little while and came back.
So after Mrs. Menendez returned home, you left your son there.
For a couple of hours. Yes, I did.
But you were concerned before she got home because Eric had been left alone.
That is correct. I asked her if she was going to go out again, and she told me she was. And she was very angry, too, because I had waited. She thought it was ridiculous that the kids could fetch for themselves while she was gone.
believe you also indicated that the Muncie house had a lake, and that you were worried about the lake.
No, not in Muncie.
Well, which
The
house?
house was in the Pennington house. The lake was in the Pennington house. I don't recall any lake on Muncie. If there was one, I don't remember.
All right, so the Pennington house had a lake, and you were concerned about the lake.
It's right behind the house. The house was at the border of the lake.
Did you ever let your son go over to the house when you weren't there?
Yes, I did. When he was a little bit older, I left him more than when he was smaller.
But when he was smaller, did you leave him there?
I left him. I left Marta, my daughter, many times with him to watch over him.
Did you ever leave him alone without Marta being there?
Yes, I did.
And you knew about the lake, correct?
Yes, but Kitty was there.
And you knew that in spite of Kitty being there, that she often did not supervise her children.
That is correct. And I made very sure that Andy remembered the instructions of what to do and what not to do. That was the condition. He loved so much to be with Eric that he would do anything for me to be with Eric. So I would say, okay, Andy, I'll let you go if you promise me that you're going to behave as if you had no supervision, because you're not going to get any supervision. And he did.
How old was Andy when they moved into the Pennington house? Do you remember?
Well, I don't know when they moved to the Pennington house. They were living in the Pennington house in 1979 when I arrived in Princeton. That was the first time I went to the Pennington house.
And when was your son, when was Andy born?
Andy was born in July 14th, 1973.
So when you got to the United States, Andy was about 6 years old.
That is correct.
How old was your son Andy when he got the injury which required 17 stitches?
He was 3.
And I believe you indicated that you had left him alone with Kitty Menendez. Is that correct?
No, that is not correct.
Well, you'd left him at the Menendez home.
No, I was in Puerto Rico and he had gone on a trip to my sister's with Marta, and he was spending a month with Marta in New Jersey at my sister Terry's house.
And it's your understanding that your son Andy was at the Menendez home when he cut himself. Is that correct?
Yeah, I'm going to object to this because this is beyond her personal knowledge. She was in Puerto Rico.
Objection sustained. I've granted the case.
I believe you indicated that your son Andy required 17 stitches at some point after being at the Menendez home. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And was it your state of mind that somehow someone had neglected him?
I'm going to object to that. Her state of mind is not an issue.
When your son Andy was 3 years old, you saw him with a cut on his chin, correct?
Not on the chin,
Where was this cut?
right on his forehead.
And it had stitches in it, correct?
Of course.
And then when you moved to the Princeton area, I believe you indicated that it was 1979 and the Menendezes had a lake behind their house, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And you continued to leave your son Andy at the Menendez home after he had sustained this cut with the 17 stitches, correct?
Andy was not 3 years old.
He was 6 years old.
He was 6.5, 7. When he was 6 and 7, I would leave him with his sisters. When he was older, around 8 or 9, he used to stay by himself with Eric and Kitty and Lyle.
I believe you've indicated in your testimony, in your direct examination, that your brother encouraged competition among the boys, including your sons. Is that
is
correct?
correct. Yes.
I believe you indicated in your direct examination that there were animal feces inside of the homes that the Menendez lived in. Is that correct?
Yes, all over the place.
I believe you indicated there was animal food in the house.
Yes, because they had the dog and the ferret as well would go into the laundry room where the food was and just pull it out and spread it all over.
I believe you indicated that there was dirty laundry in the house.
Yes.
And that sometimes the defendants wore clothes that were dirty.
Yes.
I believe you indicated that Kitty didn't really participate too much in meal preparation, that the children got their own meals on occasion.
The only meal that Kitty prepared was the evening meal.
I believe you indicated that Mr. Menendez spoke abusively to his sons.
Oh, yes.
I believe you indicated that Mrs. Menendez drove recklessly,
Yes,
and that at least on one occasion you saw her take Valium,
that's correct.
and you left your son there.
Objection, Your Honor. That's argumentative.
Yes, Andy loved Eric so much that it would break my heart not to leave him playing with his cousin. It was only for one day, and I knew one day was not going to hurt him.
I believe that you indicated you let him spend the night there as well.
One day, that's it. I would leave him Saturday morning and pick him up Sunday afternoon.
How
When I
many-
was going to my other kids, they were all in sports in college and high school, so I was going to travel with them to watch their matches and games.
Were you worried about your son Andy when you left him in this environment?
I would call him a couple of times Saturday night and Sunday morning, many times.
Did you ever consider taking him with you?
Yes, I wanted to take him with me. He didn't want to go. He said it was boring to sit down beside a swimming pool or in a volleyball game or a water polo game, whatever the kid was, to sit there all afternoon. And I could understand. He was only a 7-year-old and he really wanted to be and play with Eric. I could understand that. He
So-
was my brother. We're better.
And so all of these things that you've complained about in the Menendez household did not keep you from leaving your son there.
Objection argumentative.
It worried me though.
But you left him there anyway.
Objection argumentative.
Yes, I left him there anyway with a lot of instructions, but I did.
And you also, your daughter, Marianne, also lived there for a period of 2 months.
Marianne was an adult at the time.
She could make her own
She
choices.
had just finished college, so she was an adult. She decided to stay there because she wanted to work in town and Kitty offered her to stay there. It was her choice, not mine.
I have nothing further at this witness.
All right, is there a redirect? All right,
Were you afraid of your brother?
I wasn't afraid of him. I was intimidated by him.
You were afraid of his mouth and his anger, weren't you?
Oh, yes.
And on some level, were you also afraid of Kitty, of her anger as well?
Objection Vegas to what level?
I'm sorry,
Vegas to what level she's talking about? I think she said on some level.
objection, did you understand the question?
Yes, I do understand.
Objection
Yes.
overruled.
Kitty was, I was even more scared of Kitty because at least with Jose, I know when it was coming. Kitty would change from being very quiet to being very abruptly aggressive, and it was very scary. You didn't know what to expect. So Kitty was somebody that I was very careful not to get in her rage because it was just out of hand.
Prosecutor was basically asking you, why didn't you interfere and intervene and run to the police and have them all arrested for child abuse? Did you feel that you actually knew everything that was going on in that home?
Of course not.
Did you feel these were very secretive and private people?
Objection calls for speculation.
Overruled.
They were very secretive and private.
And with respect to your brother, would you say that in your family circle, the exception perhaps of your mother, that he was the strongest willed person in the family?
That is correct, and your exception is well taken.
And wasn't your brother your mother's darling?
Yes.
And were you conscious of the fact that if you criticized your brother or tried to do anything that would harm your brother, that it would bring down the wrath of your mother?
Objection sustained.
Did you have some concerns with respect to your relationship with and your ability to continue within the family headed by your mother if you were to say or do anything that could hurt your brother?
I didn't have concerns at the time, but it's definitely true.
When you were living in New Jersey with your 5 children,
Yes.
were you a single mother?
Yes, I was.
Were you supporting those children on your own?
Yes, I was.
And was your family important to you?
Very important. That's why I moved to Princeton when I divorced.
To be with your sister and your brother and their families?
That's correct.
And did you have any desire to disrupt and bring scandal to your family?
Objection relevance and reading.
Overruled.
Not at all. It's the last thing I wanted to do. I had enough disruption in my own family.
And even after your brother and your sister-in-law were dead, were you conscious of the notion of not bringing any negative scandal to your brother and sister-in-law?
Of course, there was a very beautiful image of what the Menendez had been, and I didn't want to change that. I wish I would have never had to change it.
With respect to this notion of image, was image and status as important to Kitty as it was to Jose?
Objection calls for speculation and is the
Sustained on the former ground.
Did Kitty talk to you about the importance of one's status in society and other people's perceptions of one?
Yes, that was the most important thing for her. What people thought of her was very important.
I have nothing further, Your Honor.
Any redirect on behalf of Lyle Menendez? Any further cross-examination? All right. How long will the examination of this witness take before the Eric Menendez jury? All right, ladies and gentlemen, as far as the Lyle Menendez jury is concerned, we'll excuse you until 2 o'clock. As far as the Eric Menendez jury, we'll have you back at 1:30. There's some testimony the lawyers have that would relate only to this witness before the Eric Menendez jury. So the Lyle Menendez jury is excused until 2 o'clock. Don't discuss this matter with anyone. Don't form any final opinions about it here at your respective appointed times.
One of my favorite supplements is Cunol Turmeric. Turmeric helps with healthy joints and inflammation support, and Cunol has the #1 doctor recommended form of turmeric. Cunol, the brand I trust.
All right.
Mrs. Cano, in 1989, were you at that time working for Smith Barney?
Could you repeat the question?
All right, let me ask it open. Who were you working for in August, September, October of 1989?
For Smith, Barney, Harris, and Upham. That's correct.
Okay,
Harris and Upham.
that's
name
a
of
stock brokerage company.
That is correct.
And you were working in West Palm Beach, Florida.
That is correct.
Now, you've testified earlier today that you were the person who made the claim on the Sun Life insurance policy.
Yes, I did.
Now, with respect to Eric Menendez, do you remember when the policy, strike that. Do you remember that time when the company, Sun Life, paid out on the policy?
Yes, I do.
And did they pay out in one installment or in more than one?
No, they paid in 2 installments. They paid 2 different things.
Okay, they paid 2 installments.
That's
Correct.
correct.
And where did the checks from Sun Life, the payments go?
They go to the agent, which in this case is me.
And what did you do with the checks, Eric's checks, when you received them?
I informed Eric that I had received the money.
And did he give you certain instructions about what to do with it?
Yes, he did.
What did he tell you to do with it?
He told me he didn't want to deal with money, that he didn't know what to do with so much money, to put it in his account at Smith Barney.
Did he already have an account at Smith Barney?
Yes, he did.
From before the time his parents
Their
were killed?
father had opened it for them 2 years before.
And so what did you do then with those 2 proceeds checks as you received each one?
I deposit them in Eric's account.
And did you, subsequent to that time, make investments of some of that money on Eric's behalf?
Yes, I did.
Now, did he tell you what to invest in, or did you advise him?
No, I advised him.
And did he follow your advice?
Yes, he did.
Now, over the course of the next few months, were you consulted by Eric whenever he wanted to spend any significant amount of money?
All the time.
How frequently did you talk to him?
I talked to him practically daily.
And did you write checks and pay his bills for
Yes,
him?
I did.
And did you write those checks from this account that you had opened for him?
Yes, and other accounts as well.
He had other accounts at other places?
I suggested that he should have an account in a bank in New Jersey and a bank in California. So he wouldn't have problems cashing checks and getting cash of a machine.
You mean that was why he needed the California account?
That's correct, because he was traveling at the time between New Jersey and California and living in California. So I didn't feel that having an account with me in West Palm Beach was enough for him. He should have a local bank.
So on your suggestion, did he open an account at the United New Jersey Bank?
Yes, he did.
And did you maintain those accounts? In other words, did the statements go to you? Did you write a lot of the checks?
That is correct.
But he also was able to write checks on the Jersey.
That's right.
Gotta wait till I finish the question.
I'm sorry.
Okay. Did he also write checks on the United New Jersey Bank account?
Yes, he did.
And did you write checks on his California bank account?
Yes, I did.
Did you reconcile all those bank accounts each month?
Yes, I did.
You did all the accounting?
That's correct. I paid all his bills.
Do you recall sometime in, I believe, October of 1989, receiving a telephone call from Eric in which he was inquiring about the balance in his United Jersey bank account?
Yes, I did.
And do you recall, he asked you something, didn't he?
Yes, he did.
Okay. And did he also tell you something about his having written a check?
Yes, he did.
What did he tell you about having written a check? Your Honor, this is foundational.
All right, I'll see counsel at the sidebar.
Thank you. We're going to change the subject. Did Eric contact you and ask you questions about the advisability of his buying a Jeep?
Yes, he did.
And did he tell you that he was thinking about buying a Jeep before he actually bought it?
Yes.
And did you, in fact, write the check to buy the Jeep?
Yes, I did.
And did he indicate to you whether he had received any advice before buying the Jeep?
Yes, he did.
And did he indicate to you who he had received advice from?
Yes.
And who did he tell you he received advice from?
Steve Goldberg, which is the lawyer of the estate.
Steve Goldberg is the lawyer for the estates of Jose and Mary Louise Menendez.
That's correct.
And you're acquainted with him, are you not?
Yes, I am.
And to your knowledge, he was obtained to be the estate lawyer by your sister Terry and your brother-in-law Carlos Barral.
That is correct.
And did you have dealings with Steve Goldberg having to do with Eric and financial planning for Eric?
I'm sorry.
Expenditures of Eric's and structuring Eric's life. Did you have
Yes.
discussions with Steve
Yes, I
Goldberg
did.
about that? Returning to the issue of cars, were you familiar in August of 1989 with what kind of vehicle Eric owned?
Yes, I did.
And what did he own?
He owned a 1987 Ford Escort.
And was it your understanding that that's a car that his parents had purchased for him?
Yes, it was.
And do you know what happened to that 1987 Ford Escort?
Yes, I do.
And what happened to it?
Eric wanted to sell it, so I bought it from him.
And you bought it for whose use?
For my son Andy, which at the time had become 16 and a half and he could be driving.
And did Eric indicate to you any reason why he wanted to sell that car?
Overruled. Overruled.
He told me he didn't want to have that car anymore.
Did he give you any other explanation?
No.
Now, do you recall a time when Eric rented an apartment at the Marina City Club?
Yes.
And do you recall having a discussion with him concerning furniture?
Yes.
And what did he indicate was his intention with respect to furniture at that time?
Let me have the question read back, please.
Question, what did he indicate was his intention with respect to furniture at that time?
Overruled.
I was present in California, by the way.
All right, let me get to that. You were here when he was seeking to furnish the apartment in the
It
Marina?
was more than that. He called me to come to help him close the contract of the deal in the rental.
Okay.
I was present when that contract was closed.
Okay, and then was there some discussion about how he would furnish this apartment?
Yes.
And what was his stated intention as to how he was going to furnish it?
He wanted to rent some furniture.
And did you have a conversation with him concerning the advisability of renting versus buying?
Yes, I did.
And did you give him certain advice?
Yes, I did.
What advice did you give him?
I told him that paying $1,200 a month for rent for a period of time of a year or 6 months or 7 months, which at the time he was renting for, was ridiculous, that he should take some money that for that same amount of money that he was going to spend, he could have his own furniture and do whatever he wanted afterwards.
And
We
did you?
clarified that $1,200 for rent was for furniture.
Yes, Your Honor. That was for the
Monthly,
that's what
correct.
it would have cost.
That
to
was a
furnish that
monthly
apartment.
rental that he, on the furniture that he had already looked at, and he took me to see.
Okay, so you advised him to buy.
That's correct.
Did you then go shopping with him?
Yes, I did.
And did you assist in? Did you advise him in the purchase of furniture?
Definitely. We did it together.
And were you aware of the fact that he purchased a pool table?
Yes,
And did he discuss that with you before he bought it?
yes,
And did you approve that purchase?
definitely. They always had a pool table.
The family always had a pool table?
Yes.
Now, to your knowledge, do you know what furniture, if any, Eric had moved from the Beverly Hills house to his apartment?
I know that he didn't want any furniture from the Beverly Hills house. I don't recall what furniture he had.
Do you know if he moved his bed?
Yes, that's right. I suggested him, that's right, that he should keep his bedroom because they were expensive and he loved water beds. That's what he wanted. So
Was
I had his water bed repaired, which had been broken for a long time.
Okay, let me back up. The question was.
I'm sorry.
I know, it's hard. Question was, did he have his bedroom furniture moved from the Beverly Hills house to his apartment?
Yes.
Did he have any other furniture from any other part of that house moved to his apartment?
No.
Did he take anything from any other part of the house to his apartment?
No.
And you advised him and assisted and helped him in purchasing all the other furniture for his apartment?
That is correct.
Now, you know that he had a roommate in that apartment?
Yes.
And did the roommate come with his own furniture?
The roommate had his own bedroom and his own desk.
And was that roommate a young man named Noel
Yes.
Nedley?
Yes.
He pronounced his name the way a girl pronounces
Yes.
his name. And were you aware of whether or not Eric lived with Noel Nedley before they moved together to the Marina City Club?
Yes, he stayed at his home for a certain period of time. I don't know how long though. He did. That was one of the places that he was staying at.
One of the places that Eric was staying at before he got the apartment?
That's correct.
Now, you are a financial planner, and you've been a financial planner, you're a stockbroker. Do you also manage money for clients?
Yes, I do.
And you were managing Eric's money for him.
That is correct.
Did he do any spending that you consider to be excessive or extravagant or equivalent to a spree?
No.
Objection calls for improper opinion. Move to strike the matter.
Objection sustained. The answer is stricken.
Did he do any spending for things for himself without consulting you?
Objection, lack of foundation.
If you know.
Yeah, that you
From your
know.
own knowledge
No, he
from
did not.
expenditures from
Other
Mr.
than a
Callis.
T-shirt or a pair of shorts.
Or
he
clothes.
Did not. Exactly.
So anything that he purchased of any size, you knew about in advance?
That is correct.
Did you have a discussion with him about his spending habits, or strike that? Did he share with you his attitude about spending this money, the insurance money?
Objection calls for hearsay.
You can answer yes or no.
Yes.
And did he indicate to you what his state of mind was with respect to spending this money?
Yes, he did.
And what did he indicate?
He told me that he was very scared of managing money. He had no idea what to do with it. All he wanted to do was play tennis and be with somebody. He didn't want to be alone.
What do you mean by be with somebody?
He did not want to be alone. He wanted to have some company. He just didn't want to think.
Did he tell you that he was interested or enjoy? Strike that. Did he tell you that that he enjoyed spending large sums of money?
No, not at all.
Did he tell you the opposite of that?
Yes, he told me that if he did inherit, he would give this money to the homeless kids that ran away from home.
Now, as far as you know, before the time that Eric and his brother were arrested, they had not inherited any of the money from the estate.
That is correct.
The only money they got was from this insurance policy that you made the claim on.
That is correct.
And as far as you know, the estate is still in probate. Nothing's finished with it.
That is correct.
Over the course of his life, had you ever observed Eric to be extravagant with money?
He never was.
Now, the things that he was doing, renting this nice apartment, buying this furniture, getting a Jeep Wrangler automobile, did that, based on your knowledge of the family and on his parents' spending habits with respect to the children, did that mark for you a change in lifestyle of any kind?
Not-
Objection calls for improper opinion.
Overruled.
Not at all.
Now, you had mentioned before in your testimony an individual named Mark Heffernan. Did you know him to be a tennis coach of Eric's?
Yes,
And were you involved on some level in negotiating a contract with Mark Heffernan?
yes, I was.
And do you remember when those negotiations with respect to that contract began?
Around October, November.
Of 1989?
That is correct.
And who first brought this issue to your attention about having a contract for Mr. Heffernan?
You mean who told me of the issue?
How'd you get involved in this?
Eric called me and told me that Mark Heffernan had suggested that he could do this, that he would work for him only and he would make sure that he got his training and his psychological things and on and on and on.
Okay, the minute you say a sentence with the word he in it for two different people, we got lost.
I'm
okay?
sorry.
All right. Eric called you
That is correct.
and he told you that Mark Heffernan suggested that Mark Heffernan, would be available to work full-time with Eric.
That is correct. He told me that he had said that if he,
Who's he?
Mark had said that if Eric wanted, Mark would work for him only.
Okay. And was Eric calling you to tell you that he was going to do this or to ask your advice?
Eric asked me to come to California to discuss this with him.
And did you come?
Yes, I did.
Was this a different time that when you came to buy the furniture with him and to close the lease?
Yes, it was.
Now, when you got strike that. When you got here, did you have discussions with Eric about why he now was wanting to do this full-time tennis thing?
Yes, I did.
Was it your understanding before his parents died that Eric was planning on going to college?
Yes,
Did he discuss that intention with you at the time of his graduation in June?
yes.
And when you talked to him after his parents died, on this occasion, did he indicate he was not going to go to college?
No, he indicated that he was going to postpone to January going to college. I mean, to the next semester. It wasn't January. It's
The following year?
September, right, the fall.
And did he indicate to you why he was doing that?
Objection calls for the
Sustained.
Your Honor, it's being offered for a state of mind.
Objection sustained.
You were in touch with Eric on, I think you've told us, on like a daily basis from the time of the insurance money, which was September? Was it
Yes.
September? Through this period? is
That's
that
correct.
And did he seem in those daily contacts to be stable and secure and calm and confident and know what he was doing in life?
Objection compound calls for improper opinion.
Sustained.
Or any of those things?
Same objection.
Objection
How
sustained.
did he strike you on the phone when you spoke to him?
Eric was completely lost. He would cry. He would claim that he was having these nightmares, horrible nightmares. He did not want to be alone. He was scared. He was very confused. He was totally lost. He had no idea what to do with himself.
And he expressed to you the fact that he didn't know what to do with himself?
Yes,
Did he express to you the fact that he didn't feel he could go to school and think?
that is correct. He told me that I wanted him to go to college and try to put his life back together that way among young people. And he told me he just couldn't concentrate at that time, that he just needed some time.
And did he indicate to you what it was about this notion of full-time tennis that appealed to him?
Objection hearsay.
Sustained.
Was it your understanding in your negotiations with Mark Heffernan that Mr. Heffernan would be controlling every moment of Eric's life?
Yes, it was.
Calls for conclusion on part of the question.
Objection sustained. The answer is stricken.
Did Eric express to you a desire to have every moment of his life controlled? That's not offered for the truth, Your Honor.
Objection sustained.
Skating for over 45 years has taken a toll on my body. I take Cunol turmeric because it helps with healthy joints and inflammation support. Why Cunol? It has superior absorption compared to regular turmeric. Cunol, the brand I trust.
Did you ever try to get Eric to come to Florida to live with you?
Yes,
Was that during this period of time?
yes.
And he refused?
He told me he wanted to play tennis. He wanted to be with Mark.
Now, did you today hand me this coffee stained
Yes, I'm
copy of the
sorry about that.
contract? Who spilled the coffee on the contract?
I did in my office.
Okay, a long time ago, we hope.
Yes.
All right, Your Honor, I need to mark this next in order.
Exhibit 188.
Mrs. Cano, what is that?
This is the contract that was drawn between Mark Hefferman and Eric, and indirectly with Lyle as well.
Okay, this is a contract to provide coaching services to both Lyle and Eric,
Right,
and that's the contract that Mr. Heffernan signed.
that's correct.
And does this particular copy in fact bear Eric's signature and Mark's signature?
Yes, it does.
And to the best of your knowledge, was this particular draft of this contract prepared at the law offices of Stephen B. Goldberg?
Yes, it was. It was drawn between Steve and Mark's lawyer.
And was Mark's lawyer named Ronald Goldman?
I don't know. Probably. I don't know.
And do you remember now whether it was yourself or Eric who wrote the monthly checks for Mr. Heffernan that contract provided for?
They were alternated. Sometimes he wrote them, sometimes I wrote them. At the beginning, it was the estate that wrote them when they had no money and no contract.
Well, the insurance money though came in September.
Right. But he kept on playing tennis with Mark before, I believe.
All right, but before there was a contract, he continued that Mark had been giving him hourly lessons. Was that your
Yes.
understanding?
That's right.
Do you recall Eric indicating to you why it was he felt it was necessary that he play tennis at that point in his life rather than do anything else?
Objection called for yourself.
Sustained.
That can be answered yes or no, Your Honor.
All right, you can answer that yes or no.
Yes.
And whatever it was he said to you, did that make sense given your daily contacts with Eric?
In a way, yes.
I have nothing further, Your Honor, but before the people cross-examine, I think they need to show me something.
Yes, but I need to go get what it is I need to show.
You don't have it quite yet?
No,
All
I
right,
need
well,
to look for myself, I think.
okay, well, how long is your cross going to be?
Oh, 10 minutes?
All right, we'll take a recess then until 3:30, ladies and gentlemen. Don't discuss this case, or 2:30 rather, I'm sorry. Don't discuss this case with anyone. And don't form any opinions about it. And we'll resume at 2:30. I do have the note from Mr. Emerson. Is it your feeling you won't be able to get here by 11 or?
I don't know. That's supposed to be a 45-minute session, and
As to what you think the arrival time would be.
I move it back a half hour, and I can feel comfortable.
More comfortable, like 11:30 then.
I've got to have some casting done on my foot, so I'm
Okay.
gonna have to clean up.
All right, well, we'll work it out. It might be that we'll just take the morning off then, do everybody the whole morning off. All right, we'll be in recess until 2:30, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much. We'll see you back here at 2:30. Council, please remain. All right, the jurors have left the courtroom. Ms. Abramson, you tend to shake your head negatively when the court rules against you.
Yes, I do, Your Honor.
And you had better stop doing that or the court's going to find you in contempt.
Well, the court may be finding me in contempt pretty soon anyway because I'm finding the court's rulings astonishingly biased.
Are you inviting the court to find you in contempt because you're indicating you're going to do contemptuous things?
No, I'm just saying there's only so much unfairness one can bear. and
Well,
I
counsel,
can't
if
promise
you-
that I can't do it.
If you feel that you are going to be unable to behave professionally in a non-contemptuous fashion, we'll deal with that very effectively and deal with you and your conduct, and it is not going to work to the benefit of you or your client.
I understand that, Your Honor. We do the best we can.
Well, you had better behave professionally. Warning you at this time. Is that clear?
I heard you. Yes, indeed, sir.
It's something the court will take seriously if you misbehave.
I'm sure you will.
All right, then we'll be in recess, and you've heard what the court had to say.
Yes.
All right, I believe we have everybody back in court, so all the jurors are present. The witness can get back on the witness stand, please. And this is cross-examination.
Mrs. Cano, I believe you indicated that you were responsible for filing the claim with Sun Life in order to get the proceeds of your brother's life insurance policy. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Do you remember about when it was that you filed the claim?
On August 23rd, right from Live Entertainment Office.
And I believe you've indicated that when the policy paid out, that the money was sent to you and you deposited it in the defendant's accounts at Smith Barney. Is that correct?
It could be at Smith Barney, it could be at United Jersey Bank. Either one of them was.
Well,
Some money at Smith Barney and some money at United Jersey Bank.
I believe it was your testimony on direct examination that the money was given to you and then you divided it up afterwards.
That is correct. United Jersey Bank was one of the places where I placed money.
And at the time that you made these transactions, was Eric Menendez in the same city that you were in? In other words, were you both in either the East or in
I
California?
don't recall that. I know that I require his signature on the check probably, so. I
All right.
recall that.
Do you remember what day it was that the Sun Life policy made the first payment?
No, I do not, but I know the amounts.
All right, it was approximately $400,000 divided evenly. Is that
That's
correct?
correct, 200,000 each.
Okay. Your Honor, I have here at Exhibit 140. I'd like to approach the witness, please.
Yes.
I'm going to show you an affidavit of a custodian of records of Sun Life Insurance Company.
Sure.
And referring you to paragraph 6, I'd like to have you read that, and then I'm going to ask you a question about paragraph 6. All right, now also, as long as I've got it up here, would you look at paragraph 7 as well?
Yes.
Now, Mrs. Cano, the affidavit of the custodian of records from Sun Life Assurance indicates that the money was wired directly
To the United Jersey accounts. That is, the $400,000 was wired directly on September the 8th to two accounts in New Jersey, one for Eric Menendez and one for Lyle Menendez.
I don't recall that, to be honest with you. I have the check stubs of the checks that came in, and I have them in, I believe that I gave them to our lawyers.
May I approach, Your Honor? I have here a bank document which is not yet been marked as exhibit. I'd like to show it to the witnesses, see if it refreshes the recollection.
Okay.
I've shown it to counsel. I'm going to show you a check right here, which is dated September the 11th. It's the amount of $50,000 to Smith Barney for Eric Menendez.
That's right.
All right, does that particular check refresh your memory that in fact the money was transferred from the United Jersey account to Smith Barney?
But I believe this is the second money, though.
Well, if you
This
look
is not the first money.
well, this check is dated September the 11th, the one I just showed you, right?
Yes.
Your Honor, may this be marked as the exhibit next in order?
189.
Thank you.
May I approach again?
Yes.
You said that the check that I just showed you in exhibit 189 represents the second payment, but
That's my recollection.
well, looking at this, the paragraph 7 of the affidavit of Ms. Bonina, it appears that the second payment wasn't made until September the 15th.
Could be. It doesn't really matter. I was controlling both of the accounts.
You were controlling both defendants' accounts?
both of Eric's accounts. That is correct.
I believe you indicated that you wrote the check for the Jeep.
Yes, I did.
I have here.
I signed for Eric. If that's your question.
Okay, I have here exhibit 138. I'd like to question this, please.
Yes.
Your Honor, I'm going to object to that. I think that's misleading what counsel's attempting to do.
Well, at this point, she's just showing her exhibit. What exhibit is this?
It's exhibit 138, the Jeep records.
Yes.
All right, now, were you actually with Eric Menendez the day that he signed this contract?
No, Steve Goldberg was.
And showing you the third page of the exhibit appears to be a check dated September the 21st of '89.
That is correct, but that check bounced.
All right, but this handwriting on this check is not yours.
No, it was his.
So
I sent him the second check.
all right, and the second
So
check,
the real check that was paid was the check that I wrote.
Your Honor, I have here a copy of that check. Do counsel, may I mark it as the next exhibit?
Yes, go ahead.
Exhibit 190, please.
All right. If you can identify it in some way. So
This is a copy of a letter from Smith Barney with a check attached. It's check number 191. It's all Xerox.
for what amount?
The check is for $21,241.32. I'm going to show you exhibit 190. Mrs. Cano, is this
Yes.
the check that you're referring to that you actually wrote?
That is correct.
And you wrote that check on January 26th of 1990.
That is correct.
But the check that Eric wrote was for September of '89.
I am aware of that.
I believe you indicated that you had full control of Eric's financial affairs during this period of time.
Yes, but it could be by phone. I mean, he had a checkbook with him the same way I had checkbooks with me.
So that the check that you actually wrote to the Jeep people was written approximately 4 months.
2-3 months after the check bounced and came back, he had not realized he did not have enough money on that account.
Move to strike everything after he did not realize as being non-responsive and calls for hearsay.
After that,
Yes, he did not realize. May that be stricken, please?
objection sustained. The answer is stricken.
Now, the policy, the Sun Life Assurance policy, paid out on September the 6th approximately. Is that correct?
Around sometime in September, I don't recall what date.
When you had your conversations with them, did they ask you if the beneficiaries had been cleared of being involved?
What do you
Objection,
mean?
Your Honor, objection calls for hearsay.
Objection sustained.
Were you aware of the fact that generally life insurance policies do not pay out to people who are responsible for the death of the insured?
Objection, Your Honor, since facts and not in evidence.
Overruled.
Were you aware of that?
Depending on the situation.
Well, if someone is involved in the intentional killing of the person upon whose life the policy is issued, do life insurance, from your experience in the life insurance business, do those policies pay out to the beneficiaries?
Again,
Your Honor,
depending on the
excuse me,
situation.
I'm going to object to questions called for legal conclusion as part of the witness. There's no qualifications.
You'd have to lay a foundation. Objection sustained. The answer is stricken.
How long did you work selling life insurance?
I have been working since 1980.
And do you have a license to sell life insurance?
Of course I do.
Did you take any courses in order to become
Of course I do.
and did you receive any training in the propriety of issuing life insurance proceeds to people who are responsible for the death of the insureds?
Yes, I did.
And at the time that you obtained the payout on the Sun Life Assurance policy on September the 6th, were you aware that generally life insurance companies don't pay proceeds to people involved in crimes?
Your Honor, I'm still going to object to the questions calling for legal conclusions beyond the scope of direct and irrelevant.
Objection on the first ground. It would also relate to her knowledge of the policies or practices of this particular company.
Are you aware of the policies and practices of the Sun Life Assurance Company?
Yes, I am.
And did they have a policy that they paid life insurance proceeds to people who were responsible for the death of the insureds?
Same objection, Your Honor.
Overruled.
Did they have that policy?
I'm sorry, say it again.
Did Sun Life Assurance Company have a policy that they would pay proceeds to people responsible for the deaths of the insured?
I have no idea.
Skating for over 45 years has taken a toll on my body. I take Cunol turmeric because it helps with healthy joints and inflammation support. Why Cunol? It has superior absorption compared to regular turmeric. Cunol, the brand I trust.
So this policy paid out approximately 17 days after the death of your brother, is that correct?
That is correct. They pay immediately. It's within 7 days that it's the usual and customary way of paying after the claim is placed.
Now, I believe you've indicated that you approved much of the expenditures that Eric Menendez made during the period of time before his arrest. Is that correct?
That is correct.
And the pool table that you testified, did he consult with you in order to buy the pool table?
We talked about it.
Do you remember how much it cost?
Yes, around $8,000.
And did you personally pay for that pool table?
I don't think so.
The rent on the condominium that he was,
Objection, Your Honor.
I believe it was mentioned. in
What
the
was the
direct.
question?
Rent on the-
How much was the rent on the condominium?
Objection.
All right, that has already been ruled upon.
Did you approve the purchase of a condominium by Eric Menendez?
Objection, Your Honor. Seems facts in it, not in evidence.
Overruled.
He never wanted to purchase a condominium.
The furniture that was purchased by Eric Menendez, do you remember approximately how much money he spent purchasing the furniture?
I don't recall, but something around $8,000 as well.
And did you pay for that yourself?
No, we were together. He made the checks.
And I believe you've indicated that you approved the purchase of the Jeep for about $21,000.
That is correct.
How about the Rolex watch? Did you approve that?
I don't think it was Eric's idea of the Rolex watch.
You want to help the defendants?
No, I do not. I know that Lyle was buying a Rolex watch and insisted that Eric should have one too. I was present when that conversation happened.
You were present for what conversation?
When they were talking in Princeton that Lyle wanted to go and buy a watch and convince Eric to go with him to buy one too.
When did this conversation take place?
Someplace in Princeton the week that Jose died.
After his death?
Yes.
Did the defendants go to Princeton between August the 20th and August the 24th?
Of course, we all did know, not on the 24th.
Okay, well,
Then I heard it in California. You have to admit that those were very confusing days for me too. So sometime I heard the conversation.
move to strike her answer everything after I have to admit as being non-responsive, Your Honor.
Overruled. The answer will stand.
Were you aware that Eric went on trips during the period of time?
Objection, Your Honor. May we approach?
We haven't heard the question yet.
Did you
What's your question?
Did you approve the expenditure of money for Eric to take trips between the time of his parents' death and the time of his arrest?
I object to that, Your Honor, on the basis of 402.
Overruled.
There's no reason for me to object. He was traveling to play tennis and he was traveling to take things out of his mind.
I believe you indicated that Eric Menendez told you that he wanted to give money to the homeless.
Yes, he did.
Are you aware of whether or not he ever did give money to the homeless?
He never got the estate money.
Okay. But he did get approximately $350,000.
I'm sorry, but that's peanuts.
Pardon me?
That's peanuts beside the estate. That money was not an amount of money to create a foundation. You don't create a foundation with that amount of money. It's a very small amount of money.
I believe you indicated that that they never got the estate. Is that correct? The estate was never probated to them. Is that correct?
That is correct. It hasn't
And-
finished yet.
And they got arrested, right?
Yes, it did.
I have nothing further with this witness.
Any redirects?
When Eric talked to you about the homeless, he was talking about establishing a charitable foundation
That is correct.
and about funding that foundation from monies that he would inherit.
That is correct.
And in your opinion, $350,000 would not be enough to fund a charitable foundation.
That is correct.
Now,
Plus, he couldn't put all the money on the foundation. He needed to live as well. So
okay,
Motion to strike is not responsive.
Sustained. The last portion of the answer is stricken.
to the best of your knowledge, was there any other source of income for Eric besides the insurance money?
no,
And at the time of Eric's arrest, did he still have a substantial amount of that insurance money in accounts that you controlled?
yes, he did.
And in fact, wasn't the amount of insurance money that he still had used to pay the initial legal fees for both himself and his brother?
That is correct.
I want to show you a document, Your Honor. I'd like to mark this on 191.
191.
I've already shown this to counsel. Cano, do you recognize this document?
Yes, I do.
Is that a memorandum that you received from Sun Financial Group following the telephone call that you placed the claim?
That is correct.
And does that document indicate that you made the telephone call to report the claim on August 23rd, 1989?
That is correct.
And is that the phone call placing the claim that you made from Jose Menendez's office at Live?
That is correct.
Now, does that memo was prepared by an employee at Sun Life?
Yes, in the
And-
home office.
And does that particular employee refer you to another claims person at Sun Life?
That is correct.
And is the claims person that memo refers you to the person whose affidavit Mrs. Bozanic showed you a little while ago, someone named Bonina?
That is correct. Paula Bonina. Paula Bonina. Bonina.
So you spoke to, what was the other woman's name?
Ellen Knott.
And you spoke to Miss Knott on the 23rd?
That is correct.
And did you, subsequent to receiving that memoranda from Miss Knott, speak to Paula Bonina?
Yes.
And did you, subsequent to the telephone call where you notified the claim, have to submit anything in writing?
Yes, I sent a fax, I believe, with the application, the copy of the application, which show the boys as contingent beneficiaries, and I also have to send them the death certificates.
And do you know what date it was that you sent that fax?
I don't recall, but I'm sure that it was as soon as I could gather all the information together.
Now, showing you Exhibit 138 again that Mrs. Bozanic showed you. That's the packet, the copy of the purchase documents for the Jeep.
Yes.
Could you look and see what is the date of that purchase contract?
I can find it. Oh, I'm sorry. October 21st, 1989.
And is there a signature on a line that bears that date, a signature that looks like Eric's signature?
Yes, that's Eric's signature.
And does he sign in more than one place?
Yes, he signed in 4 places, right?
And are at least 2 of those signatures dated?
Yes,
He's signing on a dated line.
that is correct.
Now let's turn to the check, the one that bounced, as he put it. What's the date on that check?
September 21st, 1989.
And does that appear to be an error given the date of the contract?
Yes, Eric made a mistake.
Now, you said that Eric was not attempting to purchase a condominium. How do you know that?
Because I know as a fact that if he would, first of all, he told me, and secondly, if he would have, I know that I would have been part of it.
When you say he told you what?
He told me that his brother Lyle was buying a condo.
Overruled.
Told you his brother was buying a condo?
Yes,
And did he have a conversation with you about loaning money to Lyle for that purpose?
that is correct.
And was that in a telephone call?
Yes,
And was he specifically asking you in that phone call if there was enough money in his United Jersey bank account to cover a deposit check that he was lending to Lyle?
that is correct.
Overruled.
That is correct.
And to the best of your knowledge, did that deposit check that Eric wrote to loan Lyle money ever clear the bank?
No, they never went through with that operation.
And did you become aware of the fact that Steve Goldberg got involved and dissuaded Lyle from doing that?
Yes, I was aware of that.
Objection sustained. The answer is stricken. Anything else by the prosecution?
Just a couple questions. I believe you indicated that Eric Menendez had no other means of support at this time. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Did he ever go get a job?
At the state of mind that
No,
he
no,
was,
The question is, did he ever go
I
get
don't
a
know.
job?
I don't know.
I thought you were involved in his financial.
Yes, but not, job was never one of the issues, so I don't know. He might have, I don't know.
Now, where else did the legal fees, you indicated that he used the remainder of the money that he got from his father's death to pay legal fees. Is that correct?
I'm sorry, can you say that again?
I believe you indicated that at the time of his arrest, that Eric Menendez used the remainder of the life insurance money he had from his father's death to pay his and his brother's legal fees.
Your
That
Honor,
is-
that misstates the testimony. It was to pay the initial legal.
Right. It was
Objection
paid,
overruled.
the retainment was paid with that money.
And that was the criminal legal fees, is that your understanding?
That is correct.
Do you know who paid for the rest of it?
And object, Your Honor, it's beyond the scope.
Sustained.
Nothing further.
Anything else?
No, Your Honor.
You may step down. You're excused.
Your Honor, I would ask that she be subject to recall, please.
All right,
Yes.
you will be ordered to return upon notice by counsel.
Good.
Yes.
All right.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Is the next witness before both juries?
Yes.
Okay. You may call that witness, and we'll get Mr. Lyle Menendez, please.